So, who is manipulating who here? Hi, I'm City Chap. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about the penultimate episode of Season 1 of Pluribus, Episode 8, Charm Offensive. There will be full spoilers ahead as I break down, recap, and review this episode. So, you have been warned. Before we start, thank you so much for your support. We've now hit over 150 subscribers. If you do enjoy the video, please consider dropping it a like and hitting subscribe so you don't miss next week's video on the season finale of Pluribus. And with that, let's begin. So the episode starts with Manousos. We see what has happened to him after the events of the last episode, where he faced a very intense physical challenge going through an incredibly treacherous jungle, despite the others warning him not to do so. But he persisted and unfortunately got severely injured. So he is woken up now in a hospital after being operated on. The doctor advises him not to move and instead to let the antibiotics do their work, and he needs to rest and stay at the hospital. But Manousos has other ideas as the camera focuses in on a knife, and I think you can guess, like I did, where this is going. We then see Manousos has the doctor hostage, and he demands not only to leave, but asks how much money he owes for the surgery. This is where he finds out he's actually landed himself in Panama. After receiving an itemized receipt, he writes on it and leaves an IOU with his name and address, and adds onto it one ambulance. He then drives off in said ambulance, and the title credits come up. Now, before we catch up with Carol, I just want to touch on Manousos' different approach and response to the others compared to Carol, along with his apparent moral code or ethics. He siphons fuel from cars along his journey, leaving money or an IOU note once he runs out on each car, instead of just filling up at a petrol station and accepting help from the others. Comparatively, Carol just calls up the others and requests a certain pump to get activated when she needs something. Manousos also refuses to accept any help at all from the others, including water, food, and transportation, going so far as to refuse their pleas when they offered to take him to Carol in the last episode, along with his car, instead of trekking through the treacherous jungle. He instead denies their request and burns his own car in defiance, telling them there is nothing you can give me because it is not yours to give. You stole it all. And that's how he ended up in this predicament. Last week's episode, we saw him face a physical challenge and journey, whilst Carol dealt more with an emotional and psychological one of being so isolated from the others. And with that, we'll go back to Carol. So once the title sequence is played, Carol makes Zoja a drink inside her home and sits down. We're picking right off where the last episode left. There is certainly a palpable awkwardness between them, which is fair considering the last time they met, Carol tricked and drugged Zoja, almost killing her in an attempt to find out the truth about a cure. As a result, Carol says she doesn't know what to talk about after a few awkward exchanges. Zoja suggests, well, we don't have to talk at all. Maybe we could play a board game. Carol says, seriously? And they have a funny exchange about which board game to play, one of which is Risk. And Carol says no at that, since it's about world domination. Zoja suggests that they play a card game instead that Carol used to play with her cousins when she was younger. Things seem to be going well between them. They're very cordial and polite to each other, certainly quite far away from when they last interacted. And the others have now almost all moved back to Albuquerque. Carol then asks Zoja, I've never thought to ask, where do you live? Zoja says, I can show you. We then arrive at a large football arena, stadium, and there are tons of the others here just getting ready, doing their nighttime routine as the entire floor is covered with mats and pillows. The others all sleep communally. Apparently, it's more efficient and it saves energy. Zoja explains that there's many spaces being used for this purpose, malls, churches, all across the world. The official Pluribus podcast reveals that the script called for a high school gymnasium originally, but unusually for a show, they said, let's go bigger. And also in the case, they filled it with real people, real extras. No CGI was used, which would have been a typical thing to do. And once again, this show goes big and it really pays off for setting the scene and drawing you into the world and the situation. As Zoja is showing Carol around, a dog comes along. Carol clarifies, this dog isn't one of you, and Zoja says, oh, no, definitely not. He's called Bear Jordan, and he's particularly affectionate with a guy called Malcolm over there, and we are happy to look after him because he is still fond of his owner. And there's a shot here where Carol is petting this dog, and Zoja is behind Carol, clearly mirroring the idea that the others perhaps see Carol as a sort of curiosity, a pet, one that they're fond of and want to care for, but nonetheless don't have a typical relationship with. Zoja asks Carol, would you like to stay with us tonight? And Carol says, no, I've got my own plans. I'll figure something out. Zoja then says she's going to lie down. And we then see Carol has also fallen asleep next to Zoja a little closely, which, yes, will pay off later. We'll get to that. And it seems Carol had missed human connection in the 40 days or so that she'd been just completely alone and isolated. So she instead spends the night in the stadium surrounded by people. The next morning, Zoja drops Carol off at her house, and Carol goes back inside, and we once again see the whiteboard, which had the list of 5 things that Carol had discovered about the others, but we haven't seen in a few episodes now. And she gets right back to it, writing number 6, they eat people. This shows that Carol has not given up investigating, which certainly seemed like it could have been a possibility at the end of last episode, after she seemed like she'd just given up, even contemplating ending it all. But this confirms that Carol is indeed still investigating, but instead has changed her tactics, going for, well, the charm offensive instead of all-out aggression. Carol and Zoja then hike to the top of a mountain with a glorious view. The guy finding the locations on this show really does a tremendous job. And in this stunning view, we see a train in the distance. Carol tells Zoja that she loves the sound of train horns. It's the loneliest sound in the world. Zoja seems surprised by this. Carol says, I thought you knew everything about me. Turns out that Carol had never told any human ever. And there is something intimate about this scene, and all of that does pay off in the end, as we will see later on in this episode. But I think it's worth noting that we haven't ever seen the others be surprised by something before, and Carol, I think, surprises herself with her own vulnerability, that she's opening up to Zoja and the others, and it's a genuinely nice moment. One which Carol continues by asking how do they communicate, because shortly after disclosing this to Zoja, the train blares its horn. Zoja explains unconsciously, using an electromagnetic field. It's like breathing to them, using the natural electric charge that every human possesses. Zoja says to Carol, you have one too, it's just unused. Carol follows this up by asking, why do you still need trains anyway? There's an uncomfortable pause and Zoja says, food distribution, which, yes, obviously makes Carol rather uncomfortable, as we now know food includes HDP. After that, we see Carol and Zoja getting a massage together. Carol asks, do you feel everything, like all of you all at once, all around the world? Zoja explains, no, not at once. That would be overwhelming. We are aware of the others, who is dying, giving birth. We're aware, but we don't feel it. It also seems that Zoja is almost personally enjoying the massage, which might hint to a certain direction that I will address in the theory section of this video at the end. We then see Carol looking for a telescope at night. Zoja is directing her to look at the planet where they believe the signal came from. Kepler 22b, which in real life is the nearest livable planet, we believe, and is covered in water. Carol asks, what are the people like on this planet? Zoja explains they're too far away for us to ever truly know, but we know we love them, and we close our eyes sometimes and imagine what the planet must be like, and we are grateful to them, and we'll pay it forward no matter how long it takes. And at this point, my ears prick up, because if you've watched earlier Pluribus videos of mine, you'll know that I had a theory right from the first episode that perhaps one of the end goals of the others, the collective, the hive, however you want to refer to them, was to transmit the signal elsewhere. In fact, in episode 1, when they first encounter the signal, they realise for it to have travelled 640 light years to them, there would have to have been an antenna the size of Africa in order to send it. So I start thinking maybe my theory wasn't so crazy after all. Carol follows up with Zoja, how exactly will you do that? Zoja says, we have to share our gift with whoever else might be out there. And I yelled out loud watching this. So I was like, I knew it, I called it. And then we get confirmation in the next shot as we are back to the whiteboard in Carol's office, which is zoomed in on the 11th point that she is writing. We will get back to all of the points that she has now added onto this whiteboard shortly. But she's writing giant antenna on her whiteboard. So they are building a giant antenna and they're going to use all the power on Earth to do it, which might explain one of the reasons they're trying to be as efficient as possible in order to have the resources to undergo this huge project. And as mentioned before, multiple points have now been added onto the whiteboard, up to 12, with all the revelations that Carol has discovered in this episode. So, as we said earlier, number 6, they eat people. Number 7, communal sleeping / body heat, energy efficient. They all sleep together in one large room. And saving electricity is mentioned as a specific reason they do this. Number 8, communicate via body's electric charge. 7 and 8 are also circled, and there's a question, are they connected? Maybe by sleeping in close proximity to each other, this increases the electric charge and their ability to communicate with each other. Number 9, trains to transport food. There's a little note next to this where Carol says, Number 10, individuals feel, everyone knows. Hive mind explained, as we saw in the massage scene. Number 11, signal from Kepler 22b, 640 light years away. So now Carol knows the origin of the signal and how far it has travelled, as we found out in episode 1. Building giant antenna in capital letters. Use all the power to send signal to space. And once again, it's nice to see that Carol hadn't given up, which could have been a direction they go after the end of last episode. She's just, as I said, changed tactics, still finding and learning new information about the others. As she's writing this down, she starts running out of ink on her whiteboard pen, and she calls Zoja for more. Zoja turns up at her front door and asks if this means what she thinks it does, and Carol looks a bit confused, and Zoja says, "You're continuing Wycaro," and Carol says, yes, that's what I'm doing. I'm continuing my Wycaro series. So she runs with that as a cover story. Zoja expresses that it will be so nice to read something new. As when you think about it, humanity has been creatively stagnant for almost 2 months since the joining now. Maybe the others will start going a bit stir crazy if they don't have new information to absorb, which could lend credence to the whole AI analogy that some people have made about this show. The idea that if nothing new is created, then AI can't generate new imagery. Instead, it will just feed into itself until it produces, well, utter crap. But Zoja reassures Carol that there's no pressure. It's just, all of humanity is waiting expectantly for your creative output. Can you imagine being in that scenario? I certainly can't. I second guess myself enough making these videos. Carol goes back inside with her new pens and she hesitates. She looks at the board, and the board with all her ideas for the next Wycaro book are in front of her. I think this pause reveals quite a lot about Carol maybe wishing she could just write her next book and forget everything about her present situation and just embrace it. Just delude herself into thinking this is okay, a bit like Mr. Diabate has, or the other survivors. But she's resolute, and she continues writing her notes on the others on the whiteboard. We then cut to Zoja and Carol alone in a giant arena. It's just the two of them, and they're continuing to play games with each other, and this time it's croquet. Carol complains after a miss that she used to be better as a child, and Zoja says, "We know." She explains that I do have the collective knowledge of every croquet champion that ever lived, so that is a bit of an advantage. Carol asks, "But I thought that was muscle memory. I understand knowing chess, but isn't this different?" Zoja then does something we haven't seen before, which is she teases Carol, mocks her a bit. She says, "Maybe, or maybe you just suck." This is new for the others, certainly for Zoja. Is this an evolution of their personality collectively, or is this just a tactic being used against Carol specifically in order to let her guard down? I think at this point it becomes apparent that this is a seduction episode. The others are actively trying to get Carol to be vulnerable with them. And Carol is obviously trying to do the same by trying to get information out of them. But it raises the questions, are they being genuine? We believe the others are telling the truth, but if they can joke around and tease, maybe they can lie as well now. Who is manipulating who exactly? Who is in control here? But maybe this is all just an effort to keep Carol specifically happy and suppressed. Carol then continues to moan about her lack of skill here, and Zoja responds with, "You poor tortured artist," which feels exactly like a line Helen would have said to Carol. They seem to have a similar dynamic as displayed in earlier episodes, where Helen would tease Carol for her cynical outlook, particularly when it came to her own work. The others are actively using Helen's personality and memories to connect with Carol. Other thing to note is that the official Pluribus Podcast revealed that they are playing on an AstroTurf field specifically because the others can't cut grass. They can't kill plants. And that obviously includes grass as well. It's just another example of the detail that's put into the show and how everyone who's working on it collectively pays attention to these details and brings it all together. And apparently it is a big collective effort in order to bring this world to life and stay consistent with the rules of the others. The next scene is at a diner, which Carol spent a lot of time at writing her first book. But the diner had closed years before and was completely desolate. The others have instead restored it simply to make Carol happy. They've even got people milling around outside, interacting with the waiters inside, using money. They're essentially putting on a play for Carol, but they must have had a lot of experience at this point because, well, they've been doing the same for Mr. Diabate for weeks now. This is probably a relatively easy scene to recreate, this little slice of reality. Carol reminisces about writing her first book in this diner and how happy she was working late to write in the morning. She also remembers a specific waitress called Brie who wouldn't bother her or mind that she was taking up the booth all day. And wouldn't you know it, who happens to appear right at that very moment with a coffee refill? But while Carol is enjoying and reminiscing, she realizes that with the appearance of Bree, what it means for all these people to put on this performance, and she storms out of the diner. Zoja follows her to her house, and where she asks if she's okay. Carol responds sarcastically, saying, "Yeah, couldn't be better, everything's peachy." And Zoja says sarcasm. She can now detect sarcasm. That's not something they could do not that long ago. Carol now seems to have dropped the pretense of being nice, and the mask is slipping a little bit. She's going back to her usual angry, ranty self. She asks Zoja if you want a drink. Zoja replies, "We will have one if it pleases you." And I think that line is very important, and we will once again discuss it in my theory section at the end of this video. Carol tells Zoja, "Please stop with the we, say I." Zoja explains that it's difficult for her to do this as it doesn't really make sense to her. Carol replies angrily, "All the brain power in the world and you can't navigate a fucking pronoun." I think Carol in this moment desperately wants to live in the fantasy that Zoja is just another person, not part of the hive, not part of the collective. Carol asks Zoja where Bree the waitress was before she was dragged here for some, quote, waitress theatre. Zoja explains that Bree was in Miami and she had moved on with her life, had a new job, was recently married, and had a new life after the diner had closed years ago. Carol is not impressed and has such a clear aversion for uprooting someone's life simply for her pleasure, in direct contrast to Mr. Diabate. Carol is annoyed because she recognizes all of this is just to try and placate her, and she says it's manipulative bullshit because you know I haven't given up. Admit it. Tell me you know I'm not going to stop. Zoja replies, "We know. We wish you would stop, but we also love Wycaro." Carol responds, "All right, honesty, cards on the table, let's go." She explains to Zoja, "There's lots of things I like about you, the others, but this situation, this is a train wreck. This is unsustainable. It's a mental illness. You're psychotic. You're starving, and you can't even pick up a goddamn apple off a tree." Zoja silently approaches her and gives her a kiss in what is sure to be a controversial scene. But despite Carol being angry at Zoja here, as I said before, I think she wants to believe this is real. She wants to delude herself into thinking that her and Zoja are just people who have met. And Carol already confessed, where she put herself under truth serum, that she finds Zoja attractive. From the very beginning, Zoja was chosen because she looked like the female version of the protagonist of Carol's book. She's always been there to seduce Carol and make her vulnerable. And so this is just the accumulation of that. But I think the scene makes it clear that Carol was 90% of the way there, basically. She wanted this to happen, and she kisses back. There is such intensity, vulnerability. Carol is hurting. She's been so alone. She is desperate for connection with another person, even if it is not another person. All in a moment, all from Ray Seahorns and Carolina Vidras. Amazing acting. You believe this chemistry, even though the situation is totally weird. But again, we come back to the question, who is manipulating who? We then cut away and Zoja has woken up alone in Carol's bed. Interestingly, on Helen's side of the bed. Carol is already up and she has printed the first chapter of her next Wycaro novel. Zoja comes in and asks how long she'd been awake, and Carol says long enough, and she invites Zoja to read it. But I question, was that all that Carol was up to? And was this entire situation to get Zoja incapacitated so Carol could do something else? We'll have to see if the next episode, the season finale, will address that. Zoja then tells Carol after she's read it, she loves it. She thinks it's a great first chapter. Curious about the fact that she has decided to switch the gender of the main protagonist. Carol says it's about time. Remember earlier on, I believe in episode 2, Carol confessed that she wanted to make the lead protagonist of her Wycaro series a female instead of a male, but decided against it, possibly to make it more palatable for audiences, particularly for women to imagine a fantasy in which a male could sweep them off their feet. They then talk very inside baseball about the Wycaro world that Carol has created, and Zoja seems to express genuine excitement over the direction that Carol is going in, and the reason she gives within the lore of the book and the world as to why she's made the decisions she's had and how she can justify them. And I believe this is all feeding into Carol's ego, this genuine excitement over her creative output, and they connect over the world that she has created. We then have a fairly significant time jump to day 60, which is about 10 days later or so, I believe. Zoja and Carol are still together. They seem very happy. They're washing dishes at the sink. Carol asks Zoja about a memory from her past, from Zoja's past specifically. Zoja retells a story about ships going out to sea, explaining that mango ice cream was the best thing she had ever tasted. and recalling a very happy memory from her past, from Zoja's past. And this is something, again, I'm going to talk about a little more in the theory section of this video, which is coming very shortly because we are nearing the end of the episode. A look then comes over Zoja and Carol asks, "Are you okay?" Zoja replies, "You have a visitor." And we cut to Manousos, who is not far away. He is in his ambulance. He's putting fresh dressing on his extensive wounds on his back, which are still healing. And he is about to cross the Mexican border and arrive in Albuquerque. But before we can see that, the episode ends. So, yes, a very interesting episode. There's certainly a change in direction for the show, I would say. And as ever, it keeps you guessing. That's what I love about it. I think the question of who is manipulating who and who is really in control is possibly the most interesting one to come out of this episode. But nonetheless, there's been lots of theories and interesting questions that have come out of this one. The others are still trying to keep Carol placated and happy, but again, what are they really up to? We know now, we have it confirmed that they are building a giant antenna, but is there anything else they're up to? And as mentioned before, Zoja is the physical manifestation of temptation for Carol. We know the others deliberately found someone who looked like the female version of her protagonist, Raban. It's how she almost recognizes her before even knowing her in episode 2, when she says, "I know that face." The others are also actively using Helen's personality and memories to connect with Carol and make her more vulnerable. We have the teasing, "Oh, you poor tortured artist," and that feels like a line Helen would have said to Carol. Vince apparently describes the others as being very loyally. They do a lot of lying by omission. They withhold information, but they are also very open about what they are doing. And the others are truly putting on the charm offensive, as is the name of this episode, but so is Carol. So I wonder if Carol's genuinely falling in love. If so, she's almost falling in love with the world, because Zoja is essentially every person on Earth, as demonstrated by her continued use of we. But Carol desperately wants to believe that Zoja is just one person, not everyone. And she does try to fool herself by asking Zoja to use I instead of we. I saw an interesting theory online about alcohol, and that's where this line that I mentioned earlier, where Zoja says, I'll drink it if it pleases you, when Carol offers her a drink. Perhaps if under the influence of alcohol, do the others lose connection to the hive? Does this disrupt this magnetic field? It's an interesting theory, and it's worth noting that at every opportunity earlier on in the show, when the others have been offered alcohol, they have always declined, or tried to have as little as possible. Perhaps another way that the others can be disconnected from the hive is by reconnecting with memories of their original host, of their past. Zoja's recollection of her previous life of eating mango ice cream seemed very real and genuine. Perhaps by remembering what it's like to be human, maybe the host connection can be severed. There are hints that Zoja is separating slightly and rediscovering more of her personality. She seemed to personally enjoy the massage, for example. That shot in the stadium seemed to me allude to the fact that Carol is a bit like a pet or a curiosity to the others. So there is genuine joy at her writing something new, but not necessarily in the way you think, or not in a traditional human-to-human relationship. Maybe Carol needs to isolate Zoja and put her in some sort of Faraday cage in order to isolate the electromagnetic connection with the hive, and then she could maybe interrogate her. But if that's the case, would Zoja even be able to speak English? We don't know if who she was before this would even be capable of doing that. But for me, I'm most excited about Carol and Manousos meeting, which is something I've been excited about for multiple episodes now. It seemed inevitable that they were going to come together, but the fact they've left it till the series finale suggests to me it's going to be quite the meeting. Will he make her choose between Zoja and saving the world? Maybe if Carol can turn her, she can achieve both. Maybe Carol could save Zoja by making her eat mango, but then would Zoja even want to stick around Carol if that's the case? Who knows? Maybe, as I said earlier, if you find something that brings the individual back, separating their personality and bringing it to the surface, that's one way to separate them from the hive. I don't know, but the fact that it's a biological imperative means to me surely the connection would just re-establish itself. Perhaps you need to talk to people and find out what their core memory is, what is central to their personality, to who they were before, to their being. And maybe by re-experiencing a core memory or a feeling or a sensation, you could save them. Maybe Carol and perhaps Manousos can save humanity by helping the others find theirs again. That would be an interesting twist on saving the world one person at a time, but we'll just have to wait until next week, which is the series finale. It's going to be out a little earlier on Christmas Eve, so make note of that. I will try my best to get it out as soon as possible, but I, like many of you, I'm sure, will be celebrating the holiday, the Christmas season. I'm sure there will be much to discuss with the season finale of Pluribus. I hope you have been enjoying the show as much as I have. Let me know down in the comments, what are your theories? What do you think is going to happen in the last episode? What questions do you think will be answered and what will be left unanswered for future seasons? We already have confirmation of season 2. And with that, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like. Feel free to subscribe. Help out a small channel and creator like myself. And I will see you in the next video. Take care.